Namaste and a very warm welcome to this esteemed gathering for today's insightful webinar on comparative world literature, proudly hosted by Hindi University West Bengal. We are deeply honored by the presence of Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University West Bengal, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, as our chairperson whose inspiring leadership and profound scholarly contributions have always been a source of immense encouragement to the academic community. And we are privileged to have you preside over this session. Welcome, ma'am. We also extend a heartfelt and distinguished welcome to our eminent speakers, Dr. Nisha Thakur and Dr. Manasi Das, both renowned scholars in the field of history and cultural studies. We eagerly look forward to their enlightening perspectives, which will undoubtedly enrich our understanding of global literary connections and dialogues. This webinar serves as a vital platform for intellectual exchanges, enabling us to cross cultural and linguistic boundaries while appreciating the shared human experience expressed through diverse narratives from across the world. Thank you all for joining us. Now, we look forward to a rewarding and stimulating session. It is our great honor to introduce Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, who has kindly sent us a video message as she is unable to join in person today due to her busy schedule. It's my great pleasure to introduce her. Professor Nandini Sahu is a distinguished academician, celebrated poet, and Amazon best-selling author whose luminous body of work beautifully bridges literature, philosophy, and culture. A double gold medalist in English literature, she earned her PhD under the mentorship of the late Professor Niranjan Mohanty at Vishwa Bharati University, Shantiniketan. With a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades, Professor Sahu has contributed immensely as a poet, critic, researcher, and visionary academic leader. Her achievements have been recognized through numerous prestigious honors, including the Michael Madhusudan Award in the year 2024, the Lifetime Achievement Award in the year 2024, the Tagore Samman recently in 2025, and a gold medal from the Honorable Vice President of India in the year 2019 for her outstanding contribution to English studies. Author and editor of 23 acclaimed books, her celebrated works Sita, Medusa, Silver Poems on My Lips, and Other Voice delve into profound themes of mythology, womanhood, post-colonial identity, and cultural consciousness. She also serves as the founder and chief editor of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Literature and Language, that is IJLL, and has played a pioneering role in designing innovative academic programs across India. We are truly honored to have her with us today to chair this session. And now, since Madam has graciously shared her inaugural address through a video message, I request our technical coordinator, Mr. Raj, to kindly play the message. Mr. Raj.
Namaskar. I am happy to welcome you to this very important lecture series on comparative world literatures offered from Hindi University, West Bengal. By now, this lecture series has gathered momentum, multiple voices across the disciplines, across the states in India, and across the countries all over the world have delivered interesting, engaging lectures as a part of this series. Our YouTube channel is the testimony of the kind of scholars and the kind of research that Hindi University West Bengal has been offering through this important lecture series on comparative world literatures. While I extend my gratitude to all the speakers who have contributed substantially to the series, I welcome the future speakers, researchers who have shown tremendous interest to be a part of this project. Today, I am particularly glad to invite two scholars from the Department of History. The names are Dr. Manasi Das. She is an assistant professor in the Department of History in RKDF University, Ranchi. And the other speaker is Dr. Nisha Thakur. She is an assistant professor in the Department of History in Autonomous University. I'm given to understand that both of them have been doing extensive research, exclusive research in history, their own disciplines, in relation to comparison and comparative literature pedagogy. You may be having this question in your mind that in a department of comparative literatures or comparative world literatures, what is the job, what is the contribution of the Department of History in the age of interdisciplinarity, when we are creating multidisciplinary research by exchanging ideas between the departments, between the disciplines. Probably there is no better department than history, which can become a part of comparative literature, or better to say comparative world literature. Oral history of any nation, the folklore, the mythology of any country, any region, any nation defines the contemporary and the contemporary literature, the contemporary history and pedagogy. History is an allied discipline in close relationship with literature. The students of literature, of any literature for that matter, first of all they have to read the history of the period, the history of the nation, after which they can get into the literature of the period. History defines literature. Look at the literary theories, the ideas from Raymond Williams kind of scholars. New historicism, cultural materialism, they have taught us literature students to look at any text through history, the parallel reading of literary texts with the texts of history, where no text marginalizes the other, rather the texts enrich each other, they supplement each other, they're complementary for each other. In such a scenario, it's a matter of great encouragement for Hindi University West Bengal that scholars, researchers and professors of history have shown interest in our lecture series. They have offered their contributions, their researches to be a part of the lecture series that is of tremendous help for our students and our teachers. I welcome both the speakers to be a part of Hindi University. Thank you very much for showing interest in Hindi University. Please go through our program guides, our newsletters, and let us know where else you can contribute as independent scholars and professors of history. Our journal, Hindi University Journal of Interdisciplinary Studies, HUJIS, which is going to be launched in December 2025, addresses varieties of issues, out of which history and historiography are very, very important topics of engagement for the scholars, for the contributors. Please go through the research papers of HUJIS and let us know if you would like to contribute to our journal as well as scholars and teachers of history. I hope and expect that your expertise is going to be of great support to my students and to my colleagues. Thank you and welcome once again. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, moving forward, I must say it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Dr. Nisha Thakur, who is presently an assistant professor in the Department of History, Adamas University, West Bengal. She earned her BA and MA in History from the University of Delhi and her MPhil and PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University under Professor Vijay Ramaswamy. Her research materialism and sacrality of the Mithila region examines the social cultural evolution of Mithila. Dr. Thakur has published widely and presented at national and international forums, including the Indian History Congress and Osaka University. Her forthcoming book, Khula Akhula, Caste and Gender Dynamics in Mithila, will be published by Primus Publishing House. So now, I would like to request Dr. Nisha Thakur for her very knowledgeable lecture. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Dr. Paramita, for the introduction and for also allowing me to speak in this very important webinar series on comparative literature. And many thanks to Honorable Vice Chancellor Ma'am Nandini Sahu Ma'am. I had the honor to do a course which she coordinated in IGNU on folklore and culture studies, and that is the time when I was also about to start my research. So it helped me connect my subject, my area with the interdisciplinary aspect of literature and history. Ma'am rightly pointed out that history defines literature, and taking lead from here, I would like to present my paper that is very integral to my book that is going to publish from Primus very soon. The topic, before I start, let me share the PPT. Now, as you can see, the topic of my lecture is negotiating the religious boundaries, Udayanacharya's debate with Buddhism in a comparative philosophical frame. Now, here in this paper, I would like to focus on three things and also would like to bring your attention to the three things which is not very much told in the mainstream historical writings. One is to bring the philosophical discussions, the philosophical writings into the understanding of comparative literatures. The philosophical world that India represents has somehow been ignored in the historical writings. Secondly, the name Udyanacharya, that is very popular again in the philosophy, but in history and in literature, somehow these names have not received that much attention. But Udayana's contribution in the Buddhist Brahminical debate is really very important, and he has contributed a lot in our understanding how Buddhism and Brahminical theories collided, and they interacted with each other. Third important thing that I want to focus is on the region Mithila, which is a region, very small region in terms of our knowledge of Indian subcontinent. But in terms of its contribution in the literature, in the literary world of medieval times, it's a region that has contributed immensely through the writings of Udayana, and a lot of other people also wrote. So I would like to focus on this region. Now, in the study of comparative world literature, philosophical writings, especially in its polemical and dialogical forms, deserves a place alongside poetry, narrative, and drama. The Sanskrit scholastic text of medieval India, though composed within specific ritual and theological traditions, represents a remarkable instance of cross-cultural and interreligious dialogues through reasoning and rhetoric. Among these, the work of Udayana, who is often called Udyanacharya, as he was also a philosophy teacher, who belonged somewhere in 11th century CE, from Mithila, stands out as a sustained attempt to define Brahminical realism and theism in conversation with the Buddhist metaphysics. His writings, including Atma Tattva Vivek, Nyaya Kusumanjari, Kirnavali, and Lakshnavali, may thus be read not only as philosophical writings but also as contributions to the world literary traditions of dialogue, where knowledge advances through contest and conversation. Like the disputations of medieval Europe between the Christian scholastics and Islamic philosophers, or the philosophical exchanges between the Confucian and Buddhist thinkers in China, Uddiyana's writing from Mithila embody the Indian version of cosmopolitan culture of reasoning. His engagement with Buddhist logicians such as Dignag and Dharmakirti reflects a deeper intellectual process, the negotiation of boundaries between traditions, not to isolate but to mutually define each other and enrich each other. Now, let me give you a glimpse of Mithila as a region, as a landscape of intellectual continuity. Um, to understand Udayana's contribution, one must situate him within the regional and intellectual geography of Mithila. Located between Ganga River and the Himalayan excuse me, foothills, encompassing modern northern Bihar and parts of southeast Nepal, Mithila, since early medieval times, been one of the most enduring centers of Brahminical learning in South Asia. The land, often celebrated in Sanskrit text as Videha Bhumi, was associated with the legendary kings like Janak, patron of Buddhist as well as Vedic philosophy, like Yagyavalkya, and the site of philosophical dialogues in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. By the 11th century, this lineage of learning had crystallized into a regional intellectual tradition characterized by rigorous textual study, public debates that is called Vad in Sanskrit, commentary, Mithila's tolls like the monastic schools specialized in the study of Nyaya Vaisheshika, sometimes Samkhya and Mimamsa logic, then Smriti jurisprudence, making it a living continuation of the classical systems. It was in this environment of scholastic pluralism that Udayana as Acharya composed his major works that I just mentioned, which distinguished Mithila from other centers like Kashi or Navadvip was its continuity of Sanskrit learning through political changes from the Pal Buddhist rule to the Karnatas and Onivara dynasty, and later under the celebrated Darbhanga Raj. Even when Buddhist monastic universities such as Nalanda, Vikramshila declined, Mithila remained a seat of logic, debate, and Brahmanical textual preservations, often mentioning Buddhists as their biggest enemy, yet accommodating their ideas into their fold of Brahmanical learning. This persistence was not insular. The scholars of Mithila were deeply aware of Buddhist reasonings and often incorporated it into their own framework. The dialogues between Buddhist and Brahminical thinkers in Eastern India created a shared intellectual language that later became foundation to Navinaya, that is called New Logic, in the 13th century and continued till today. Thus, his writings, his works are both local and transregional, rooted in the scholastic ethos of Mithila, yet participating in the pan India conversation about truth, about perception, about reality, and of course about the differentiations. Now, the comparative dimension of these dialogues as a world literary form needs to be discussed because this is a lecture on comparative world literature. The genre of the philosophical debates in India that I mentioned, Vad, Tark, or Katha, is best understood as a literary form of argument. Like the dialogues of Plato or the scholastic disputations of the medieval Europe, these texts deploy narrative devices, hypothetical interlocutors, and rhetorical appeals to reason and authority. In this sense, the Sanskrit philosophical treatises functions as a comparative world literary artifact, a space where act of writing is inseparable from the act of dialogue. Udayanacharya's Nyaya Kusumanjari, that means a garland of logical flowers, is exemplary. Written in polished Sanskrit prose and verse, it performs a dramatization of reason, posing the Buddhist objections, responding to them with syllogistic precision, and concluding with devotional affirmation. Each section reads like the staged conversation, mirroring the structure of the questionnaire disputation in medieval Europe or the adversaries Harris's tradition of patristic theology. In comparative literary terms, such writings reveal a universal tension between faith and reason, between inherited revelation and critical inquiry. Udayana's defense of Ishwar, for instance, parallel Thomas Aquinas' reconciliation of Christian theology with Aristotelian logic. Both thinkers employ the tool of their philosophical adversaries to affirm the transcendence of divine order. However, Udayana's comparative significance lies not merely in resemblance, but in mutual illumination. His works show that India's scholastic tradition were equally capable of rational theology and analytical philosophy, and that the global history of ideas must account for these parallel epistemic cultures. The debate over self and consciousness is very important. Among Udayana's most consequential debates with Buddhism was over the existence of the self, that is very popularly known as Atma. In the Atma Tattva Viveka, another very celebrated writing of Udayana, which is translated in English also, he countered the Buddhist theory of Anatman, or the non self, which posits that the person is nothing more than a sequence of momentary mental status. Udayana asserts that such a theory cannot account for continuity of experience, recognition, or moral responsibility. He argues, if consciousness were momentary, I quote him, there could be no recognition of one's own experiences. For Udayana, the memory and moral accountability presuppose an enduring self. This reasoning, though it's metaphysical, is also literary. The I here that remembers and narrates is essential to coherence, both of experience and of narrative itself. In comparative terms, this debate echoes cross-cultural reflections on the self from the Buddhist denial of essence of the Cartesian cogito, from Hume's bundle theory to the existential notion of continuity through choice. Udayana's insistence on a stable subject places him within the global conversation about identity and temporality, one that spans philosophical and literary traditions alike. Now, theology and causation, another very important angle to look at Udayana's contribution in the field of global writing tradition, how he refutes Buddhist non-theism. In his Nyaya Kusumanjali, another important text composed and compiled by Udayana in the medieval times, he mounts a systematic defense of God's existence against both Buddhist and Mimamsa opponents. Using the method of Anuman, which is inference, and Samkhya Visheshat from numerical regularity, to establish Ishwar as the intelligent cause of the universe. So he is also taking some words from other school of philosophies like Mimamsa. For Udayana, the regularity and intelligibility of the world demands a conscious design. Buddhist theories of causation, grounded in pratya samutpada, that is dependent origination, deny any permanent or intentional agent. Udayana responds that the chain of causes must culminate in a being who is neither contingent nor momental. That is the first cause endowed with knowledge and will. This theological reasoning marks a significant cross-pollination of ideas. While opposing Buddhist doctrines, Udayan adopts their logical precision and refines his metaphysical system in response. His approach resembles a comparative dialectic where the opponent's challenge becomes a catalyst for philosophical creativity. In the wider world historical frame, such debates parallel the Islamic Kalam theologians, dialogue with Greek rationalism, or the Christian scholastic reconciliations of Aristotle and Revelation. Udayana's Nyaya Kusumanjari is thus a South Asian counterpart to this world tradition of rational theology. Now, knowledge as encounter in the Buddhist Brahminical dialogue in the history of ideas is another important avenue where a research can be conducted in this field. The debates between Buddhist and Brahminical philosophers in medieval India, where it is popularly said that Buddhism died. However, when we look at Mithila and the philosophers of this region, we find that in the writings of Brahminical philosophers, the ideas of Buddhism were preserved. It was not merely contest of doctrine; they were sites of epistemic exchange that shaped the categories of knowledge itself. Concepts such as praman means the valid cognition, anuman that is inference, and vyapti which means invariable concomitance were refined through these encounters. Buddhists like Dignav and Dharmakirti, very popular Buddhist philosophers, introduced the idea that perception is non conceptual and that words referred by exclusion, apoha. In response, the Brahminical thinkers like Udayana reasserted the realism of universal, that is, samanya, and the externality of perception. The result was a shared epistemological vocabulary, a philosophical lingua franca that transcended sectarian boundaries. This dialogue process resembles what modern theorists of world literature, such as David Damrosch, describes as the circulation of meaning across boundaries. Just as literary work gained world significance by being read and transformed across cultures, so too did these philosophical systems evolve through translations, contestations, and reinterpretations. Furthermore, these debates had a social and intellectual ecology. Monastic universities like Nalanda, which is very famous, and also Vikramshila were frequented by Buddhist by Brahminical scholars, including Kumarila Bhatta, the great Mimamsa philosopher. Conversely, Buddhist logicians studied Vedic, learning to refine their own arguments. So it is something very common in if we go by the writing tradition of the contemporary times. Um, this circulation of ideas mirrors or shows the trans-Mediterranean exchanges between Muslim, Jewish, Christian philosophers in the same period, showing that medieval India was fully part and parcel of the global history of the contemporary comparative thought, and also it was very much present in the writing ways, the sharing of the words, nomenclatures, and etc. Then, talking about the literary geography of reason, um, Mithila's significance in this story extends beyond Udayana's lifetime. The region became home to later scholastics like Gangesha Upadhyay, whose Tattva Chintamani, which was again composed in medieval time, 13th century to be precise, laid the foundation of Navya Nyaya, that is, Navya means new, Nyaya means logic. This system introduced an unparalleled technical precision in language and argumentation that influenced Indian epistemology for centuries. The continuity of Sanskrit learning in Mithila through successive political regimes, like I mentioned Pala, Mughals, Oinvaras, and Karnatas, demonstrates how these intellectual cultures could transcend religious changes. The tolls, popularly understood as villages of the areas like Darbhanga, one of the most important, powerful estates of colonial times. A village called Sarisapahi and other centers, other tolls, functioned as repositories of inherited reasons comparable to European monastic universities like Paris and uh, you know places like Paris. Now, if we consider all this. Mithila's scholasticism, also inherited, interacted with vernacular creativity, and Mathil authors such as Vidyapati, who is very, very renowned writer. He's a prolific writer. So we can't just call him a philosopher. He was also a lawmaker. He was also a poet. He was also, Shastra writer. So his writings, he also focused on vernacular for most of his writings. And Jyotireshwara Thakur, in the 14th century, who composed one of the first Mathil text called Varnaratnakar. They infused local literary cultures with philosophical motives, creating a bridge between classical reasoning and regional expressions. Thus, the intellectual heritage of Udayana continued not only in philosophy but in the literary imaginations of Mithila, shaping its contribution to Indian and world literary history. Comparative reflections, if we go into more details, the universal grammar of debate, the comparative reflections, seen through a lens of comparisons, Udyanacharya's engagement with Buddhism exemplifies what might be called the universal grammar of debate, the shared human impulse to reason across differences. Whether in the Socratic dialogues or the scholastic questionnaires or the Buddhist Vad Vivad, the dialogic form transformed disagreement into a medium of understanding. In the Indian case, such debates were conducted with formal rules that like Vad Nyaya or Vad Vivad, often emphasizing the fairness, clarity, and the pursuit of truth. Anticipating, in spite of her notions of communicative rationality, Udhyana's arguments against Buddhist idealism are thus not simply refutations. They are not just, confrontations. They embody the conviction that truth emerged through structural dialogue. When reviewed or when viewed alongside world traditions, this mode of philosophical writings challenges Eurocentric narrative of rationality. It shows that intellectual modernity has multiple genealogies, that an analytic rigor and metaphysical subtlety found in Mithila's scholasticism belong equally to the world's heritage of thought. Now, to conclude, uh, Udayana's role in the comparative world of ideas, his philosophical writings represent far more than sectarian polemics. They are monuments to a global culture of reasoning. His debates with Buddhism marked a turning point in the intellectual history of Mithila in particular and in India overall, in general, where dialogue became the method of defining truth, very unlikely of our time today. But they also belong to the wider story of world literature and philosophy, where traditions grow not in isolation but through encounter. By engaging Buddhist epistemology, Udayana transformed the Nyaya Vaisheshika realism into a robust metaphysical system that could withstand skepticism while embracing the logic. His synthesis parallels and in some way anticipates the scholastic reconciliations of faith and reasons in other parts of the world. From a comparative world literary perspective, Udayana's texts perform the same work as the dialogue and disputation genres elsewhere. They enact the dharma, they enact the thoughts, the drama of their thinking, the thoughts, and demonstrate that writing, whether in Sanskrit or Latin or Arabic, can function as a site where philosophy becomes literature and literature becomes the means of knowledge. Now, thus the intellectual world of Mithila through the writings of Udyanacharya, or exemplified by this philosopher, stands as a vital chapter in the global history of comparative literary and philosophical traditions. It reminds us that the boundaries between religion, language, epistemological thinking are not barriers, but were invitations to reason, to respond, and to reimagine the world as a network of conversation across time. So here I end my lecture and I look forward to questions. Thank you.
Sure, ma'am. Actually, we are really welcome our participants to ask questions. The question answer session will be at the end of our lectures. So I must thank you that for such an informative lecture where you discussed negotiating the religious boundaries debate with Buddhism in a comparative philosophical frame, emphasizing the role of philosophical discourse in comparative literature. You also highlighted Udayana's contribution to the Buddhist Brahmanical debate and underscored the Mithila region's rich literary heritage, illustrating how medieval Sanskrit texts fostered interreligious and cross-cultural dialogue. You also examined Udayana's Sanskrit treatises as dialogic world literary texts that merge philosophy and literary or literature, I would rather say, through debate and reasoning. Then you highlighted Udayana's refutation of the Buddhist Anatman theory in Atma Viveka and his rational defense of God's existence in Nyaya Kusumanjali, situating Mithila's intellectual tradition within global discourses on identity, logic, and divine design. Thank you. Thank you once again for such an informative lecture. Now, I am delighted to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Manasi Das, who is presently an assistant professor in the Department of History, RKDF University, Ranchi. Dr. Das has been an active academic voice in the field of history and cultural studies. She has presented papers at several national and international seminars, including at Bangladesh and Banaras Hindi University, India, and other reputed institutions too. Her scholarly engagement reflects a deep interest in comparative and transnational historical perspectives, contributing meaningful to the interdisciplinary understanding of culture, identity, and society. We are indeed privileged to have her with us today. Now, I would like to request Dr. Mansi Das for her very engaging lecture. Ma'am, please.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to all respected faculty members, scholars, participants, and also thank you, Dr. Paramita, and also thank you, Honorable VC Ma'am. Thank you. I'm honored to be here as a resource person. You have to call me. Thank you. Today, my lecture is a lecture on exploring ancient Indian history through the comparative literature with the reference to foreign accounts, the influence of Greek and Roman tradition. I try to my level best. The study of ancient Indian history has always relied upon a wide range of sources: literacy, epigraphy, numismatic, and archaeological. Yet, when we speak a reconstruct Indian's past, we find that evidence is not confined to our own subcontinent. It extends far beyond to Greek chronicles, Roman geographies, Chinese pilgrims records, and other foreign narratives. In this lecture, I would demonstrate how comparative literature study, reading Indian and foreign sources together, enables to richer, more critical understanding of our ancient civilization, its self-image and self-interaction with the wider ancient world. First, I would introduce a comparative literature as a historical tools. The phrase of comparative literature usually literacy analysis across the language or culture. However, in the context of historical inquiry, comparative literature performs a distinct function. It serves as a cross-textual mirror by Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, and Tamil sources with Greek, Latin, and later Chinese writing. We are finding overlapping disciplines, natural influences, and just as importantly, cultural misunderstandings. As Romila Thapar observed, ancient Indian history cannot be read in isolation, for it was a part of a world system that linked the Mediterranean to the Bay of Bengal. This is preferably where comparative literature becomes a independently method. Then, indigenous sources and Indian self-narrative. Literacy sources includes any written or oral composition that provides historical information, whether directly as an royal chronicles or indirectly through the religious, philosophical, or poetic words. They can be broadly divided into two indigenous sources written within India and like as a Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, or Tamil, and foreign sources, accounts of travelers, diplomats, and the pilgrims from the abroads. Let us we described indigenous literacy sources, religious literacy sources, religious literature, like as Vedic literature. The Rig Veda is the earliest known literacy sources of Indian history. It contains reveals the social, political, and religious life of the early Aryans. Their pastoral economy, claim-based society, and the nature worship. The Brahmanas and the Upanishads shows the evaluation from ritual practices, the deep philosophical thoughts. Together, they offer of a picture of the Indian formative age. Then, epics. The Ramayana and Mahabharata, these are not just a religious text, but cultural encyclopedias. They reflect ideas of kingship, dharma, and the warfare. For historian, they are valuable from the understanding moral codes and the social hierarchy of an ancient India. Buddhist lecture, Buddhist literature. The Tripitaka, Vinaya Sutta, Abhidharma, Pitaka gives informations on the life and technique of Buddha as well as kingdom like a Magadha, Koshala. The Jataka tales describe everyday life trait, cites guilds and the social mobility with the remarkable rationalism. Jain literature composed the Prakrit and Ardha Magadhi. Text like a Agnas and Kalpasutra, Bhagavati Sutra that help us the understand early republican state, merchant communities, and ethical systems. After that, we lighted on secular literature. Arthashastra by Kautilya, Chanakya. A manual of statecraft and economy from the Mauryan period. Discuss the administration, taxation, epinology, and diplomacy. Goldmine of historians of political thoughts. Sritis and Dharmasutras prescribes social laws, duties, genders, gender roles, and reflect how society imagined order, justice, and mortality. After that, historical and biographical words. Harshacharit by Banabhatta describes the court of the life of King Harsha. Rajtarangini by Kalhan, 12th century CE. In the true historical, chronological, and tracing the Kashmir king through the dates, events, and sources. And classical Sanskrit literature, poets like Kalidas, Vasa, and Sudraka give us glimpses of urban life, nature, and court culture under the Guptas and later empires. For instance, Abhigyana Sakuntalam reflects the harmony between human life and nature. Let us how the India describe itself. Uh, um, itself is a sorry. Let us first recall how the India describe itself before we going to the foreign accounts provided. In a short note, I will be once again tell the Vedic and epic literature, the Rig Veda and Mahabharata, Ramayana provide the mythological and historical frameworks of kingship, social order, and dharma. The Buddhist and Jainas text is Pali and Ardha Magadhi offered glimpses of the early civilization, trade guides, and the moral fabric society. The Arthashastra Kautila, probably completed in the Mauryan age, stand as a rational, almost Machiavellian and statecraft of economy. And Ashokan edicts in this inscribed across the subcontinent of Prakrit, Greek, and the Arabic script reveals the both imperial administration and the cross-cultural diplomacy. Now I focused on foreign accounts. External mirror of India. Greek sources. The earliest systematic foreign observer was Megasthenes, the ambassador of Seleucus. And the court of Chandragupta Mauryan around the late 4th century BC. His work of India, now lost but preserved a fragments through Strabo, Aryan, and the Aryan, offers the details describe disciplines of Indian geography, cites caste and division, and the administrative organization. Megasthenes wrote, for instance, the Indians never drink wine, but make a liquor from rice instead. And they live under the monarch, but they are free from the slavery. While some of the statesmen appear idealized, he referred to the centralized bureaucracy and the sevenfold administrative division find collaboration in the Arthashastra. Roman geographics. By the 1st century, Roman author had taken over the narratives. The Periples of the Erythraean Sea, 1st century, the enormous Greek text from the Red Sea region in a partially maritime manual. It listed Indian port and the details the combines trades, trades ivory, like as ivory, tortoise shell, and pearls, and the fine textile. Pliny the elder, the natural history, laminates the India drains the Roman Empire of its gold. Remark collaborated by the discovery of Roman Ptolemy geography, 2nd century, attempt the first systematic mapping of Indian subcontinent. Through this account, we are quantitative information, distance, wind pattern, and the port location that complement Indian literacy disciplinary traits. After that, Chinese testimonies. Although the beyond of Greek or Roman phase, the records of Fahian, 5th century CE, and Yuan 7th century CE, provides a continuity. The document Buddhist centers, universities, and pilgrims' routes, showing how the India's spiritual influence extended uh, eastward. Comparative analysis, Indian and foreign views of dialogues. When we place the corpuses side by side, we see fascinating dialogues of the percipients and misperception. Megasthenes' portrayal of the Mauryan Empire as a rationally organized, almost utopian monarchy resonate with the Kautilya's administration vision through the Megasthenes misreads certain social categories. Ashoka's edicts in Greek and the Aramaic founds in the Afghanistan explain Afghanistan maintain a Hellenistic king such as a Antichorus and the Ptolemy fears. This confirms directly diplomatic awareness between the Mauryan and Hellenistic world. In this early century, the Pericles and Sangam poems describe the same phenomenon from opposite sources. Source the Roman author blasting interrupt of the proper of James, while the bearing a gold and wine jars from the Yavana lands. This comparative literature allow us to reconstruct the economic history of the Indian Ocean world from the both ends and Mediterranean, the Tamil coast, remarkable coverage. Greek and Roman influence of Indian culture and art, political and intellectual exchanges. Following the Alexander companions, Greek settlers established of the Indo-Greek kingdoms of Bactrian and northwestern India, 2nd and 1st century BCE. One of the most famous ruler in Minandar, known as a Milanda, in Indian tradition, appears in the Buddhist text Milinth Panchoho. In a dialogues with the monarch Nagasena, the text composed in Pali, but shaped by the Greek sacred method of the dialectic demonstrations as an intellectual fusion between the Hellenistic reason and the Buddhist meta philosophy. Artistic of in the iconographic system. Now, here is the Greek-Indian interaction more visually evident than in Gandhara art. The Buddhist sculpture from Takshila and Peshwar exhibit Hellenistic neutralism. Following the curly hair and the sense explanation, the remaining extract of classical Greek statuary. Art as an art historical Susan historical notes the Gandhara art represent a moment when the Buddhism, a keyword of human face, shaped by Greek hand. Similarly, in the Greek coins illustrated the blending the language of symbols. Coins of Menander bear Greek's legend on one side and the Kharoshthi inscriptions on the other. Some depict Janus or Anthera alongside the Indian Chakra and Triratna. These artifacts supported by the numismatic and the sculptural evidence confirm that cross-cultural dialogues was a not merely literacy but deeply merited. Possible literacy parallelly uh, direct textual boarding in the different proofs scholar have the noted conceptual parallel between the Platonic dialogue and the Upanishad style and philosophical debate, as well as between Stoic ethics of Buddhist detachment. We are methodology using the comparative literature to the understanding. As a point, it is crucially clarify how the comparative literature should be used as methodological tools in a historical reconstruction. Textual collaboration, whenever possible, we must cross-verify foreign accounts with a Indian inscription, coin, archaeological findings. For an example, Periplus mentioned the export, the black paper. This is sustained by the paper remains found in a Roman site by the Sangam description source and the Sangam description. Interdisciplinary integration, interdisciplinary integration, literacy comparison must be complemented by the archaeological epigraphy and the numerics by systematic ensure that the literacy data and grounded in marital reality. From the cumulative testimony, both Indian and foreign sources could hand image the ancient Indian appears as a politically organized empire admired even by the outside for its governance. A commercial powerhouse connected through the maritime trade routes to the Egypt and Rome. The cultural magnet were Hellenistic art a new spiritual expression, and the intellectual crossword were the philosophical dialogue translate the language. Comparative literature thus that transform our understanding from the self-contained, the narrative in a shared civilized history. The modern relevance of the course cross-culture study. First, the Greek-Roman authors did not discover India, nor was India isolated wonderland. Rather a historian, Himananshu Prof. Roy, 2003, notes that the Indian Ocean was an interactive continuum, marketing moves and the ideas. Second, comparative literature researches promote interdisciplinary education, beginning together philosophy, archaeological, art, history, precisely the integration our criteria. Thirdly, in a globalized world, acknowledging ancient interconnection remained as remind us that the cross cultural exchanges is not a modern phenomenon. It is a old habit of the humanity. My concluded part that in conclusion, I exploration of ancient Indian history through the comparative literature reveals a dialogues of civilization that shaped not only a political but also economical pattern and artistic and intellectual tradition. India was not merely a passive recipient of the foreign influence. It actively interpreted, transformed, and re-export ideas into a universal idea. That is the Greek in Bactria and India. In India, the Hellenistic period did not die. It was absorbed, and in a being absorbed in it life anew. The spirit of mutual transformation should guide our contemporary scholarship. Let us therefore view the comparative literature not a peripheral exercise, but as a method, historical empathy, a way to understand how civilization show the shape and reminded each other. The compare is not a divided but illuminate, for through the comparison civilization reminder each other. Last but not the least, Nalanda Vishwavidyalaya, Nalanda University stand as a symbol of India's ancient heritage of knowledge, cultural exchange, and the academic excellence, and its modern revival represent a bridge between the ancient and the contemporary. But, but now Nalanda University was not wind. We are very enriching about our indigenous sources. Thank you very much. That's all. And forwarding question and meaningful discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mansipal, for such an insightful lecture where you discussed a comprehensive overview of India's literary and historical sources, distinguishing between indigenous texts like Vedic, epic, Buddhist, Jain, and secular works, and foreign accounts by Greek and Roman travelers. You also emphasized how texts like Rig Veda, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Tripitaka, and Arthashastra reveal India's socio-political, religious, and philosophical evolution, while works like Harsha and Ras Tarangini illuminate cultural and historical contexts. You also highlighted the importance of Nalanda University, the literary works like Megasthenes Indica, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, and many more other literary works underscored their value in understanding India's trade networks, governance, and cross cultural exchanges. Thank you once again. Now, I would request our participants, if there is any questions, you may please ask. Is there anyone?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much Dr. Nisha Thakur and Dr. Manasi Das for enriching us with such a wonderful lecture. I had a question for Dr. Manasi Das.
Yes, sure.
Importance of Nalanda University as an indigenous sources.
Very good question. Yes, obviously, Nalanda University is a very important as an indigenous sources. I explained briefly. Nalanda Universities holds immense of importance of indigenous sources for the understanding history, culture, education systems, and intellectual traditions of the ancient India, established during the Gupta's period in Nalanda University around the 5th century BCE. Nalanda was one of the world's earliest residential universities and the major center of higher learning for nearly 70 years, 700 years. And it is a known as a center for indigenous knowledge and learning. Nalanda represents the Indian model of education, which focused of holistic learning, combining philosophy, logic, grammar, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and the most important Buddhist studies. The curriculum and pedagogical analysis were designed indigenously, reflecting the intellectual self-sufficiency of ancient India rather than foreign influence. And it also a preservation of Indian philosophical religious tradition. Nalanda was a key center of the study of Buddhism, particularly Mahayana tradition. It played a major role of preserving Sanskrit text, commentaries, and the philosophical debates that are primary sources reconstructed India's religious history. And it also archaeological epigraphical evidence. Nalanda University has uncovered inscriptions, sculptures, and safes and the manuscripts that provide the first and indigenous evidence of educational, administrative, and cultural life. The materials serve as a primary historical sources, offering insights into the Indians' educational heritage from within rather than from the foreign accounts. And lastly, indigenous educational system, which nowadays NEP depends on the indigenous educational systems. The organization of Nalanda with the thousands of students and the teachers well planned hostels, librarian, database halls, and shows the advanced indigenous model of universities education long before the establishment of Western universities. And it demonstrates how India developed a systematic and institutionalization approach of education of own its. I think Dr. Shomita, I answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would request our participants, if there is any more questions, please come forward. Okay, so I don't think if rather if we get any questions from the participants, we will love to send it to our speakers later on. We request our participants to send their questions to our Hindi University mail address so that we can share it with our speakers. Thank you. Thank you for your active participation. And as we come to the conclusion of this enlightening webinar on comparative world literatures. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made today's session a meaningful and memorable academic experience. On behalf of Hindi University West Bengal, we express our deepest thanks to our respected chairperson, Professor Nandini Sahu, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University West Bengal, for her inspiring leadership and constant encouragement that made this event possible. Our sincere appreciation goes to our eminent speakers, Dr. Nisha Thakur and Dr. Mansi Das, for their thought-provoking insights and scholarly deliberations. Their perspective on literature, history, and culture across borders have enriched our understanding of the global literary landscape. We also extend our gratitude to the Hindi University administration, our technical team, and especially Mr. Raj for ensuring the smooth coordination of the entire event. Most importantly, heartfelt thanks to all our participants, faculty members, and students for joining us today and engaging with such enthusiasm. Your presence and participation added warmth and depth to this academic gathering. Let us carry forward the spirit of comparative inquiry and cultural dialogue that this webinar has so wonderfully inspired. Thank you once again, and we look forward to meeting you all in our next academic venture. Thank you and have a very good day. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dr. Paramita. Thank you.